Welcome everyone. My name is Elian Ramos. I'm Yargi Gares, and I welcome you to our Hangout today. We're going to be talking about the topic of the day, which is the crisis in the border, and the humanitarian crisis that it is. We've been hearing reports about what is going on with the children there, and the way that the whole situation is being handled. And to be honest, we feel sometimes a little bit impotent, like unable to do anything about it. But tonight we're going to be talking with a group of people who are doing a lot of things to help the kids in the border. They have launched initiatives across the country to help the kids and to help the organizations that are helping the kids. We're also going to talk about the situation in general, but also about the options that the government has in order to deal with this situation. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guests. First off, we have Brent Wilkes, who is the National Executive Director for the League of Latin American Citizens, LULAC. How are you, Brent?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on, Elaine.
No, thank you for taking the time. And you came at the last minute, so I appreciate that very much.
Of course.
Next up, we have somebody who needs no introduction. She's really our heroine, one of the people that we look up to in the Latino community. She's a legend, a living legend, Dolores Huerta. How are you, Dolores?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
So good to have you, as always. And next we have Wendy Young, who is the president for Kids in Need of Defense, KIND. How are you, Wendy? Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on.
And let's start talking about the situation in general. What is really going on at the border? According to some reports, the whole migration of children in mass started back in 2011, but it's really been in the last couple of months that it's kind of escalated to a boiling point. So why is this happening now, and what has really caused this seemingly sudden crisis to happen? Who wants to go first?
This is Wendy. I can jump in if you want. Really, I think the starting point for understanding this crisis is the violence that's happening in Central America, particularly in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. We did start to see the numbers of unaccompanied children arriving in the United States start to tick up in October 2011. And I have to say, initially, I think we thought it was a bit of an aberration and that things would settle back down to normal, but they never really did. From that point forward, we saw a consistent doubling in numbers each year. And then this spring, we really reached a tipping point, and we have already exceeded the number of children arriving in this fiscal year that was projected, and we expect about 90,000 this year.
There's some noise in the background, so I don't know what it is. Brent or Dolores, do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Well, go ahead, Grant.
No, Dolores, go, please.
No, go ahead. Follow up.
I was going to say it's absolutely a humanitarian crisis, and I think that's first and foremost what we have to respond to before people start bringing politics into the discussion and start trying to read this into the larger discussion on immigration. This is really a crisis where people are coming to our border because they fear for their lives, they fear persecution, there's the violence and the gang activity in their ascending areas, and they're coming and they're not trying to cross the border without inspection. They're coming right up to Border Patrol or customs agents and saying, I'm here to apply for asylum, and they're requesting that. And there's a process for us to follow when that happens. And yes, it's been a bit of a surprise to the government. I think a lot of us who've been looking at this over time realized that the numbers were increasing and that the government was not going to be prepared for the type of influx that they're experiencing at the moment. But the truth is, we have to respond to this just like we would any other humanitarian crisis, and we have to respond to it treating these individuals like refugees that they are, and not try to respond to them as if they're undocumented immigrants that are just coming here for economic reasons. They actually are in fear for their lives. They have credible asylum claims, and first and foremost, we have to provide the humanitarian relief that they need, and second, we have to give them a chance to get before a judge and make their case on their asylum claim.
Dolores?
Well, I think the one thing that, as usual, we in the United States, we really don't look to ourselves to see what our contribution to the crisis was. We know that many of the gangs, especially in El Salvador, that were formed by young people that were in gangs here, that were deported to El Salvador and continued their gang activity over there. Many of them had been raised in the United States. They really didn't know their own country, so to speak, because they brought here as children. And yet, and I mean, we don't know exactly what offenses they committed, but, you know, they were basically said go to jail or go back to El Salvador, and so many of them went back there, and then they formed additional gangs. But the other thing, I mean, we can look at that in two different ways. One of them, what we do here in the United States, we do not give enough attention to our children that you would even make them go into gangs in the first place, which is, I think, an ongoing problem that we have, not including those that have come here now or that created the crisis that has made so many people want to leave their homes. But the other issue is that when we think of all of the money that we contributed in the wars in Honduras and El Salvador and Nicaragua, you know, and even in Guatemala, you know, because we are a culprit there too, because we brought down a democratic government in Guatemala. The United States was responsible for that. So we have a great debt to Latin America, and especially those Central American countries, because we have, in fact, our foreign policies have created a lot of the poverty, the turmoil, and everything that's going on over there. And that's the one thing that I think people are not really talking about that. I mean, I'm not saying that nobody is good. Of course, some people are. But the general public, the general media is not talking about, hey, we in the United States, we have created these issues. We have created the problems that are causing this huge migration to come into the United States of America. And somehow we've got to take some form of responsibility. And, you know, this reminded me, of course, you're all very young, but I will remember that when the Holocaust was happening in Germany and Jews were trying to come into the United States, that we actually rejected many of the Jews that were trying to escape the Holocaust that were coming to the United States, and we actually in the United States did not accept many of the Jewish refugees that were coming in here to escape death. But we have a very similar situation here. From everything that I have heard and gathered, these young people and these mothers that are coming, they're actually trying to flee death. They are here fighting for their lives right now, and this is the only place where they can have a safe sanctuary. And so that we really got to, you know, keep pressuring our government and to make sure that they, as was said earlier, that this is a humanitarian crisis. These folks are escaping extreme violence. They're running for their lives, and we've got to do whatever we can to help them. And I think it's heartwarming to see that many, especially the religious communities, have stepped up and they've, you know, come out and they're supporting these children and helping find homes for them. And I think that many of us can do a lot more than that, and kind of spread that around. And Ileana, I want to thank you very much for, you know, putting that up on your web page to let people know where they can actually give donations and where they can go to actually assist many of these young people and these mothers that are coming in escaping death.
No, I'm very grateful that you wanted to join me in doing this, because Dolores, you know, you are the inspiration behind all of this. I mean, everything that we do, we look up to you so much. But let's go back to these kids. We have seen all of these protests going on around the country, and granted, they're not huge protests, because, you know, if you look at the polls, the great majority of Americans are actually asking for these kids to be treated humanely. But they have been protests around the country, and it seems like the situation is bringing out the worst in people, in the American people. And why do you think there is such a lack of compassion in a country that is supposed to be the land of immigrants? I mean, it's unbelievable to see what is happening in some places in the country, like Murrieta. Why do you think that is happening right now in this country?
Well, I can go first. I think it's happening in California. It's you know, the same racism. These people forget that their grandparents were escaping very similar issues in the countries that they were leaving, whether it was the famine in Ireland or jails that they had, and these terrible jail sentences that they had for the poor people in Europe, and they forget why their grandparents came here. They came here for this very, very same reasons, to escape poverty and violence and maltreatment in their countries. And I think they have to be constantly reminded of that. And so and it's just racism. Again, they forget that this country was a brown country initially. It was never a white country when the Pilgrims came here, and the people that are coming here are actually part of the continent, part of the indigenous peoples of the continent. So you might say that this is just part of their homeland. It's a little bit north of maybe where they're at, but this is part of their homeland. And the people that came here from Europe were the immigrants that came here originally. And I think that we have to constantly put that in their face and constantly remind them that the resources of this great nation that we have, of the Americas, has helped them prosper. And so they should not, turn their backs and have these hard hearts that you mentioned to people who are, just trying to survive.
Very true. Very true. Anyone else wants to add anything?
This is Wendy. I just want to jump in. I think that there's some that are politically stirring this up too in a very cynical way to create a battle in Washington, D.C. over this issue, and they're forgetting that children are at the heart of this issue, and that if we can be sympathetic and compassionate to anyone, can't we be compassionate to children? And I think it's very, very important that we raise our voices to push back on that dynamic. And I can tell you here at KIND, we have dozens and dozens of emails, phone calls, people wanting to help these children, and we need to voices and remind ourselves of our better self.
I agree. Brent?
I agree with both Wendy and Dolores. The situation is that we've actually seen this small group of people. It's not the majority of Americans, but the small group of people that are really dehumanizing the immigrant community, and they have repeatedly said outrageous things about immigrants. If you remember the Republican primary process in the last election cycle, and people were talking about electrifying fences and shocking people to death, and they seem to be falling all over each other, trying to be mean towards immigrants. And I think what ends up happening is, even when you have a situation of children in desperate need and humanitarian crisis, they still can't bring themselves to realize the gravity of the situation, realize it's time to set aside all that hateful rhetoric and just to take action and provide the assistance that's needed. And instead, they keep on with this mantra of hatefulness, and it's really disgusting. It's something that, as Americans, we should be ashamed of, and we should do everything we can to isolate those folks and hold them up for the shame that they deserve, because that is not the response that this country should be providing in this situation or any other situation like this. When people are in desperate need of assistance and they're coming to us for help, we have always held ourselves out as a country that is the shining beacon on the top of the hill that's supposed to be the land of opportunity and the land of caring people. And these few people are giving us a bad name, and we should punish them for that.
I know, and especially, you see all of the calls to deport these kids. There's some of the representatives asking to stop the DREAM Act altogether, which has nothing to do with the situation that is going on, but they want to throw it in there too. So let's go back to the kids. Are there any legal protections that these kids have to avoid being deported, to be given the right due of law? Is there anything for them that's available?
Well, I do not. Go ahead, Wendy, or do we have a legal person on the someone that can address it? We do know that they're supposed to be given a hearing before they, to see whether they are really asylum seekers. And of course, we know that Henry Cuellar from Texas introduced a bill. Unfortunately, he is a Democrat, but he's kind of a closet Republican, always has been, to kind of expedite that process, or to take away the hearing process from them so they could be deported easier. Of course, Cuellar's from Texas. We also know that Perry is also sending additional troops to the border, to try to prevent, people from coming in. So we kind of have some of those same scenarios that are playing out again. And I guess the other issue is that how many of these children or mothers are going before these immigration judges without any kind of a representation. I think one of the things that we could insist upon is that every single person that goes before a hearing should have an attorney or someone that can represent them in those hearings, so they're not at the mercy of the judges without anybody to defend them.
Very true. Wendy?
Yeah, Dolores just put her finger on it. Some are proposing that these kids actually be screened by Border Patrol agents right at the border, right after arrival. These kids arrive traumatized, frightened. They don't speak English. There's no way they can articulate that kind of sophisticated, this is the situation I'm coming from, before Border Patrol agents. So we need to provide these children with full hearings, with counsel who can help them navigate the complexities of our immigration laws. And I've walked into immigration courts and seen children as young as 5 years old stand before a judge with a DHS prosecutor, that 5-year-old's removal from the United States, and there's the 5-year-old with nobody to help her. This isn't what we stand for as a country. It is a complete denial of due process and fundamental fairness for some of the most vulnerable kids in the world.
Very true. And what happens to these kids after they're caught? What is the process there from when they're caught at the border to where, whatever happens to them? We don't even know what's going to happen.
Well, legally, they go ahead, Brent, sorry.
What's supposed to happen is within 72 hours, they're supposed to be turned over to HHS if they're unaccompanied minors. And that hadn't been happening at first, but I understand now that they're getting a bit quicker at that, and they're trying to stay within the 72-hour time frame. HHS will provide the medical assistance, the humanitarian assistance that they require and care for them until they can be reunited with a loved one. And I think one of the things that you just mentioned a little bit earlier was this issue of they do have an opportunity to go before an immigration judge to hear their asylum claim. However, unfortunately, in the United States, we do not provide counsel like we do for many other folks who go before courts. We do not provide pro bono counsel. They have to get that counsel on their own. And just spoke to the White House today. They are asking us, and I'm hoping all of the listeners, to help identify attorneys who are willing to donate their time because there is going to be a large number of people who need assistance from legal advice, and there aren't enough pro bono attorneys that are currently available to handle the caseload. They are going to ramp up the judges, but we still need attorneys to represent the individuals. That's really, really important. But once they're united with loved ones, they do wait for that hearing date, and at that time it's really important that they have representation. Those that do have representation, about 40% will have their asylum claim accepted. Without representation, the asylum rate plummets, and the chances that they'll be able to stay is much, much lower.
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of the lawyers, I know at least one organization out there is offering free legal representation to these migrant children and their families. It's called the American Bar Association Pro Bono Project in South Texas. So, I don't have the direct link to them, but if you Google it, the American Bar Association Pro Bono Project of South Texas is offering legal representation for free for these children and their families. Let's talk about a little bit about. You guys mentioned a little bit about how the system seems to be overwhelmed, and now we know that this situation didn't just happen. It's been happening for a while, right? It's been happening since 2011 or even earlier, and now it's kind of exploded. But why isn't the system prepared to handle all of these children? Aren't they supposed to be prepared for situations like this?
Well, I doubt it. I mean, I don't think that. I think when we think of the Homeland Security, it seems to be more of a military force, you might say, on the border rather than a humanitarian, any kind of humanitarian force at the border, because it seems that's of course what we call it, the militarization of the Mexican-American border. And I mean, and of course it's been a long time since I visited any kind of a facility, but when I did have that occasion, I didn't see that there was anything that except it was just like another jail for people. And it's sad to think that the children that are coming are actually being put like in cages, right? I mean, who would think that we would treat children in that fashion. But I think at the same time we do have to give credit to some of the areas where they are trying to open up abandoned schools and other areas where the children can be safe and secured and possibly more comfortable. So we know that it's not all negative, and I think we do have to give credit to some of the areas that they are trying to actually place these children so they can be in a more humane situation. And again, when you talk about the question that you asked was such an important question, shouldn't we have been prepared? I mean, what is our relationship with these countries in Latin America that are in our back door that we don't even know what's happening over there? Here, every time we pick up, and I like to say this all the time, when you pick up the New York Times or the Washington Post, and you can read everything about the Middle East, you can read everything about Asia and Europe, but it's very, very little ever comes into the news about what's going on in Latin America. You have to be a Spanish speaker. You have to be able to watch the Spanish-speaking television to really get any news about what's happening in Latin America, because the U.S. media, it's like Latin America doesn't exist. They just completely ignore. And the only time that you read anything is when they get some big narco that's been busted, or more people are being killed or whatever. So the news coming out in America is very negative, and so I think when something like this happens, and they always say that the children shall be the leaders, we find out there's so many gaps in our society of things that should be addressed when it comes to Latin America, and it's a reflection on us in the United States of America that here are our best neighbors, the people that you might say are in our backyard, and yet that we are so totally not only ignorant, but actually it's more than ignorant, it's ignoring what's going on there in terms of our responsibilities and what we can do to help when we're busy trying to, be involved in other parts of the world, but not here. And when I say involved, I don't mean involved in a negative way as we have in the past by, the School of the Americas and creating terrorist organizations the way that we did in the past, but it being able to be helpful to our Latin American neighbors in a positive way.
Mm. So talking about that, and we have talked about the situation and everything that is going on, but what do you think would be the right solution for this? I mean, we it's almost like, it's being positioned as, we either do right by the kids or we do right by the country, and I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. What do you think is the solution?
Some
Go ahead.
some policymakers are blaming the law as being the cause of this problem, and I just want to say the law is probably the only thing in place that actually can protect these children. So repealing the protections that are under the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act would be a horrible mistake from our perspective. What can be fixed is the resources for the system. I do think that the administration was ill-prepared for this crisis, but that the system that was in place to care for these children pre-surge is a very strong system, and we need to resource it to take care of these kids appropriately. We need to resource our immigration courts to conduct full hearings, but on a more timely basis. That's a problem that has, frankly, nothing to do with these children. It's long pre-existed this crisis, but I think the crisis has underscored that the courts have been neglected for a very long time, and we need to step up and provide them the resources so these kids can have a fair hearing. And very much along the lines of what Dolores was saying, we need to look at what's happening in the region and help these countries through targeted and very appropriate foreign aid that helps rebuild these countries and focuses on at-risk youth and children in their communities.
Mm. Wendy, you mentioned, and really quick, I'm going to take a question from the public. There's people sending in questions through the comments here, and one is related to something that you just mentioned about how many of these kids are part of human trafficking. Do you have any numbers on that? Do we know yet?
I have not heard an exact estimate of that, but I fear that a lot of kids are being trafficked. Of course, when you're trafficked, you're probably the ones that are least likely to be detected in the system, and yet you're the most vulnerable in so many ways, too.
Honestly, thank you, thank you. So now let's talk about what you guys are doing. I admire the three of you so much in so many ways, but I know that you all come from organizations that are doing different initiatives, different organizing different things to help these kids. So can you talk a little bit about what each of you is doing? You know, we have. A good amount of time still to talk about it. So I wanted to explain it very well and to tell people where they can go. Who wants to go first?
I think that in terms of what we can participate in is, of course, with what you put out, Elian, to kind of refer people there. I think that here in California, there's some stuff that's going on. I really don't have my finger on everything that's happening. There are two events though that are going on. One of them that will be starting this week, and that is a march of women that are going to be marching from Merced, California, down to the border. And they're going to be doing this march because they want to bring attention to the plight of the children and the women that are coming in from the Central America. There's also a fast that is happening right now on Olvera Street in Los Angeles. Is it the Placita, which is kind of where Los Angeles began. And they're doing a fast now. They've been fasting now. They're going to be ending their fast on Thursday. I think they've been fasting for a week. And these are all young people that are fasting, and they're offering this fast in support of the children that are coming across the border right now. I think that all of us so can really engage politically in keeping pressuring our representatives. I was happy to see that our speaker, I should say the minority leader, who was a former speaker, Nancy Pelosi, kind of turned around and gave a more positive statement in support of these children instead of following the initial line that was saying deport, 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 right? And I think that's a positive. That some of at least our Democratic Congress people are calling out for a more humane treatment. So I think on the political front, I think that we can do a lot. I know that National Council La Raza is ending up their convention that they're having in Los Angeles today, and they've also come out with some very, very positive statements. And I guess LULAC, you guys just finished your convention in New York. And so I don't know, what came out of that.
Brent?
Well, sure. Let me jump in there. So I think that first and foremost we want to help with humanitarian assistance, not just to the facilities that are housing them initially, but a lot of the support services that the families and the children need after they get out of the facilities are in dire need of supplies, of materials, and of course cash assistance to help deal with the large numbers of individuals that we're talking about. So what we've announced is a campaign with multiple partners, and we're glad to be part of your campaign now as well. But we're activating our local membership around the country. We're working with our corporate alliance, including a very important partner, Univision, who's going to help us get the word out about the need to raise money, need to locate attorneys, and we're coordinating that with the White House and with both HHS and DHS to ensure that we have access to the facilities and are able to deliver the need where it's needed most. We're also looking to broaden the base as well to include the American Red Cross as well as Catholic social services to make sure that, or Catholic charities, to make sure that we can work with the teams that they have on the ground already. But I can tell you the LULAC members are already out visiting these facilities. They're providing in-kind support as well as cash support. And very importantly, I think to Dolores' point, we're ensuring that, kind of looking at these facilities, ensuring that the conditions there are humane, that if there is concern, that we bring that to the attention of the White House and the different agencies, and to make sure that people are not being mistreated while they're in there. And then finally, I think, again, we do need to work on the policy campaign here. It does concern me greatly the way Congress has been debating this issue. They are playing politics when everyone should agree that humanitarian relief needs to be provided immediately. If you want to have a larger conversation about immigration, we think that's important as well. But right now, what's needed is the relief to ensure that the government has the capability of delivering the services that are absolutely required at the moment. And I want to just, again, point out what Dolores has been saying about the need to help these three Central American countries that are really responsible for the large numbers of children that are coming right now, because we have had a historic role in, unfortunately, in destabilizing those countries. It's absolutely the wrong approach to seal the border and send these children right back to where they're coming from, knowing that they risk their lives, many probably if you're not making it to our border in the first place, and then sending them back is absolutely cruel and not acceptable for our country, especially considering what we have, the role that we have played in Latin America, and especially in Central America and these countries. We have to change our foreign aid. Right now, 90% of our aid goes outside our own hemisphere. We need to bring some of that aid back and get it to these Central American countries, because if you look at Costa Rica, they're in the same area and they're not having the same challenges. The countries that are having challenges are the ones that we've unfortunately had a destabilizing role in the past. We can get them back on track if we provide the humanitarian assistance to those sending countries and to help them repair their nations, considering the fact that we've helped to stabilize them. That would be the long-term solution to the challenge that we're facing today.
I agree in everything that you just said, and I guess the whole situation just needs to be reframed, from scratch. It's being framed the wrong way, and because of that framing, we've been focusing on the wrong things. I think the most important thing is the human part of it, right? Wendy?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you again for launching this campaign and drawing attention to the issue. And Kind provides volunteer legal services to these children, and we've trained over 7,800 lawyers in the private sector to volunteer their time and resources to represent the children in their immigration proceedings. So we do this in partnership with 120 law firms, corporations, and law schools. And we look forward to working with organizations such as LULAC to grow that movement even further, because obviously as the number of children arriving has increased, that need is even bigger. And I do think that we can rally the troops in the legal community and meet this need if we all work together. So we very much look forward to that. And then I do want to just wholeheartedly underscore what both Dolores and Brent said. We need to speak out. We need to talk to our policymakers and let them know that Americans will welcome these children. We'll open our hearts to these children and provide them the care and the services that they need. And at the same time, look at what's happening in the countries of origin and help them overcome the violence and poverty and other issues that are making it difficult for these children to remain home.
Very true, very true. So I think we're running a little bit out of time. I know that we started a little late, but I want, before we go, I want you to tell me, I get so many calls on a daily basis, and especially after we launch these Border Kids Relief Projects campaign, we've been inundated by calls from people from all over the country people who are trying to help and they don't know how. And this is part of why we started the project to begin with. But I want to, the three of you, you are leaders in the community, you are people admire and respect. What can people do? What is your call to action to the people who are watching the show right now?
Well, I can go first. I'll just say absolutely they should donate. They should visit your website so that people can donate, and if those that can volunteer, that they do so. But one other thing is, let's just keep, in addition to everything that we do, let's just keep on point here and remind people that the United States of America, our government, we have a responsibility toward these children, and we have a responsibility to these countries. I always like to say to people, can imagine all of the bananas that we eat every single day in the United States of America. That money does not go to the people in Guatemala or Honduras or these Central American countries. That money goes to Dole, or it goes to the Chiquita Banana people. The people there, the people that bananas are grown, the people that do the work to bring the bananas to our table, they are not getting the money. And I think some of the corporations also have to be held accountable, and we've got to say to them too, okay, you've gotten rich off of the work and the labor and the resources of these Latin American countries. It's time for you to give something back. And it's time for us in the United States of America that we've got to give something back now. Now's the time. Now's the time. These children are calling us to action.
Very good. Very good. You heard it from Dolores, and when Dolores says something, we better move, right? Brent?
You know, I think we should just imagine that it's our children that are in these facilities right now, without the blankets and the food and the water and the conditions that you've seen on TV. Imagine it's your kids, and that you want to make sure that they're getting the support that they need, because they're somebody's kids, and they're every bit as precious as your own. And it's really important for us to treat them as if they are our own kids, and that we need to provide them with that assistance. So first and foremost, show some compassion, volunteer, donate, visit those facilities, let them know that they're loved, and let's show people our heart first and foremost. And then yes, let's heed Dolores' call to action, press our policymakers to make the right decisions, to put aside the acrimony and the politics and the anti-immigrant rhetoric, and to treat these young folks with humanity and respect, and with the promise that they still have to deliver to our world. That's how we should treat them. And finally, you know, let's stop pretending we can't solve this problem. I mean, we are the world's wealthiest nation. We, as Dolores says, a lot of people have made a lot of money off of Central America. They're not that large of a country where we can't come in and make a huge difference if we do things right and respectfully, and help, you know, to truly build up the economy. So that's really important, because at the end of the day, if we can make stronger partners in our own hemisphere, that'll pay dividends for centuries to come, for all people in this hemisphere, and of course for our own country as well.
Very true. Very true. And Wendy, call to action from you, from Karen.
Simply call your members of Congress, flood them with phone calls. They need to hear your voice. And if you need more information, I welcome people to go to our website at supportkind.org.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you heard it from three leaders of the community. You know, Brent says compassion, and also, you know, to act on behalf of these countries. Dolores said to donate, but also to get to create a consciousness that this country has a lot to do with the situation down there, and that we should work to solve it as well. And Wendy says the same thing, to call your Congress people so that they hear you out. I want to leave you with something too. We last week, just as LULAC was launching their campaign during the conference, I didn't have the chance to go, but we did launch a campaign called the Border Kids Relief. And although we don't have really the capacity to do a lot of the real actual relief work that some of the organizations are doing on the ground, but we do want to harness all of the power that we have online to really help conduit volunteers and donations and help to these organizations that are helping our kids. And I've been very fortunate, you know, to have people like Dolores to be there from the very beginning, and she's the inspiration for everything that we're doing, and to have Wendy and the good people of Kind to join us from the very beginning as well. And now Brent, and you heard it here first, the primicia, that LULAC is also partnering with us, and we are forever grateful, because I know you guys are an amazing organization, and you have the backup of so many great individuals and organizations. And the way I see it is the more the merrier, right? The more that we can unite forces to do good by these kids, the better. So I want to leave you with that. The website is called borderkidsrelief.org. I urge you all to go in there for, you know, to find places to donate, to find places to send money or items critical items, but also other kind of resources. There's petitions in there, listings for petitions. There's a whole bunch of resources for you if you want to help in some way. So I want to leave you with that, and thank you so much for watching the show tonight. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Dolores, and thank you, Wendy, for taking the time to be here and for all your support. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ilian. Sí se puede. We can do it.
Sí se puede. Have a great night. I see you next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.